G'day guys, welcome back to another episode of A Gambled Life. On this episode, we go through our Cape York adventure. This adventure is going to go over a couple of episodes as there is so much I got to jam pack into them. On this first episode, we are going through how we planned our trip, going through some tips and tricks so you can plan your own trips, or this information can be used to plan any sort of trip, not just a Cape York trip. So let's get to it. Back in August 2023, me and my wife were on our honeymoon trip. We went up through Central Australia, right up the middle, and then came down the oldtelegraphtrack. While we were on this trip, we actually thought to ourselves, bugger it, let's do a Cape York trip. And it's something that a lot of people always want to do, but can never find their actual time to do it. So we were just like, bugger it, let's plan it. We'll put a date and get to it. Some time and thinking went on. I put a post up in my group chat asking my mates on this date, the 19th of July, would they like to come to Cape York with us, as it'd be awesome to have a few more mates come along. I said to them, get your cars ready, save your money up, and let's get to it. Now let's get into the details on how we planned this trip, but also how I got my Triton ready for the biggest trip that we had ever done, to make sure we were comfortable for the 4 weeks we were on the road, but also to survive the trip. Hello, Axel. Hello. Hello. How we planned the route. We'd already done a trip up to Cairns in my old Falcon many years before, so we did not want to take the same road that we did then. So we brought up some Google maps of Australia, trying to find a route that was different. This route that we chose virtually sent us directly straight up the centre of New South Wales, right into outback Queensland, right through the centre, right up to far north Queensland, and then chucking a ridey. When planning the route, we made sure we included some cool things we wanted to see along the way, so we weren't just driving on end. We bought a HEMA map of the Cape York area, which also had a book along with it, so it had some tips and tricks about the Cape York area, what to expect on tracks, and also some cool things to see. Also watching some other people's YouTube videos to get some tips. Joining a Facebook group called To the Cape York and Back information gives you some tips along the way. Some of these tips was to, with your grocery shopping, plan your route around it, because as you get further north, the grocery shops get smaller, so you can't get as much as where you would at your normal Coles and Woolworths. Another tip with fresh veggies and fruit, check your borders, as some borders like Victoria, South Australia, and the border between Victoria and New South Wales there is a fruit fly control, so you can't actually cross the border with fresh fruit and produce. So just keep that in mind when you're planning a trip if you are like us coming up from Victoria. When you have mapped out your route, work out your time frame availability that you have. In our case, we had 4 weeks to do this trip. To give us more time up the tip, we planned to do some really long drives to get up there quicker. I do not encourage this, it was just something we did. If you are on a short time frame though, it is something that you can do to make sure you have more time to enjoy Cape York itself and everything else you want to do. Along the route, plan your camping areas, look at free camps, cheap camps, wherever you can stay along the route to save some money. Spread them out so you can do your longer drives and know that you can get there in time, but also plan around getting there within a kilometre range so you know you won't run out of fuel. On to calculating a rough fuel usage price so you can budget that into your trip. How we do that is work out a worst case scenario of spending $2.50 every single time you pump into your car. Times that by 75 litres, that equals $180. We are going to be doing 10,000 kilometres on this trip. Divide that by 450 kilometres is a rough range of what I get out of my Triton when in worse conditions. That equals 22 times that I'm going to be filling up. So take that $180, times that by 22 gives you $4,125 that you might be spending on fuel. This is just a worst case scenario. We actually spent on this trip $2,541.95. We used a total literage use of 1,274 litres of diesel. That is the same equivalent of 142 slabs of beer, just to put into perspective. A handy tip is to pre-make some meals so you can have for lunches and dinner along the route to save some money. We pre-made some pasta dishes in some foil baked tins that we put in the freezer a few weeks in advance before the trip. This allowed us to, when we wanted dinner, an hour and a half before, we got them out of the fridge, chucked them in the travel buddy, continued driving for a while, pulled up, had a nice hot dinner, and were able to keep driving. This saved us a lot of money on the trip because it allowed us to virtually get all the way up into far north Queensland without having to buy a single meal. Just a handy tip. Make yourself an itinerary to follow along each day. This allows you to know where you are going to be staying each day, how many hours in the day you might have to drive that day, how many kilometres you're going to travel, so you can keep an eye on costs and everything else you're going to have to spend that day, including some of the prepaid stuff you got to do, and also get yourself pumped to see some of the cool stuff along the way. Just know sometimes plans don't work out, and this is where winging it comes in, and you just got to work it out as you go. Right, let's get into how I got my Triton ready for this trip. There was so much I did in a short amount of time, so let's get into it and I'll tell you what I did. I started off buying a daily so I could actually work on the Triton and park it up and not have to worry about getting it ready to go to work each day. Meet Pedro, my 1994 Falcon XGU. I picked this car up for an absolute bargain, but it came without rego, so this meant that I had to get it a roadie and fix it up so I could get rego on it. This included doing front end bushes, ball joints and tie rods, and getting a new exhaust as it was rusted out, some new tyres and a few other things to clean it up for the roadworthy. But it passed with flying colours as I didn't let anything go astray. We trailered it to Vic Roads to get rego on it, and now we have a daily driver, so let's get onto the Triton. Starting off with the Triton, we fixed the rear diff lock, as this car is fitted with a factory rear diff lock, but I somehow managed to shear every single bolt on the diaphragm actuator that is inside the diff, but I wonder how that happened. Being a factory diff lock, Mitsubishi wanted an absolute fortune for the parts to fix mine, so cheapest way around this was buy a second-hand diff centre. And as you do when you fit new parts, you go out and test them. We officially have a rear diff lock again. I tripped over in the paddock at home, breaking my tibia at ankle level. This led for me to having tech screws and roofing straps in my leg. This really put the spanners in the works, as it led to me having 13 weeks off work in a moon boot and virtually off my feet for a good part of that, which really meant that I could not do anything to get ready for this Cape York trip for a big chunk of time. This made that the mods that I had to do to my vehicle to get ready for Cape, that I had to really pick carefully on what I had to do, because our budget sort of went out the window a little bit. I redid my canopy setup before we left, adding some carpeted walls. Because I did this meant that I had to redo my 12 volt setup, adding, while I was there, a couple extra 12 volt sockets, some extra lights, an Anderson plug for the travel buddy that I fitted, finally, and some 12 volt computer fans behind the wall, pushing some air into the canopy, but also drawing out at the same time. These walls are made out of 9mm marine ply I had laying around, and it's just marine carpet over them. My 12 volt setup's pretty basic, and yes, I did it in my living room setting it up. Whipped up a rear wall to have more storage and reinstalled it in the canopy. I wanted to mount my travel buddy from the roof, so I made a custom mount, and it sits nicely above the fridge. On to bar work. I knew potentially I'd be leaning my Triton against banks on this trip, so to protect the Triton and make sure those guards stay straight, I whipped up some scrub bars that would marry up into my sliders, which included some clamps to bolt it up into my bull bar hoops. I got in contact with car builders to get some of their texture 2K coating. This paint I bought with my own money because I'm a big fan of gloss bar work on a car. I went with the texture 2K because it leaves a gloss finish when done, and because of it's a 2K product, it is a really strong, durable product, so I knew I could put it through some abuse at Cape York and it will still come back in good condition. I then pulled all my bar work off and pulled my tray apart. It is really handy when you build a tray that you can actually pull apart to paint. After all the tray and bar work was off the vehicle, I took it into work where my boss would help me sandblast it all. Sandblasting the steel leaves you a perfectly clean surface to paint on. I then set all the bar work up at work, primed it all, and then laid the 2K texture coat down, and what an awesome finish it left. I did some mods to my rooftop tent before we left. I originally mounted this rooftop tent on a frame that I had made up. This allowed the tent to rise over my roof rack on my car so it would clear and not rub. But this frame that I had made up weighed 50 kilos, so that's a weight saving in itself, just pulling that off the car. So I did some trimming to the rooftop tent so it still cleared the roof rack but sat lower on the car. This is that frame that used to sit under my rooftop tent. It was made out of 50 by 50 RHS, and that was the length of my tray. A big rectangle, so it weighed a fair bit. My solution was to trim the floor, add some strip aluminium to strengthen it all back up, and now it will sit lower on my tray and still clear the roof rack. I then added my new Ironman Deltawing 270 awning. This awning is absolutely awesome. It is lightweight but has the features of completely freestanding with the option of dropping some legs down that are built into the awning, but also has built-in LED lights. These lights just light up camp and make it well more enjoyable when you're sitting there at night around the campfire. Awesome. I mounted the awning up to the floor of my rooftop tent using the Ironman brackets, also making some brace mounts into the tray for extra support. I reinstalled the rooftop tent with the new awning attached to it onto the vehicle and had to open it up and check the lights out at night, and how awesome does it look. I redid all the wiring to my driving lights and light bar on the roof. I was sick of these lights trying to set my car on fire due to the fact that the wiring wasn't up to amperage, but also the fuses that they had used in these pre-made wiring loom kits were just garbage. So I ripped it all out and built my own using proper fuses that were to handle the amperage that these lights can pull, but also wiring that was overkilled for amperage. I strongly suggest that you look into how much power your lights draw, as some of the kits on the market, their wiring looms are just not up to scratch. While I was there, I finally fitted an isolator on my winch. As another safety thing, you should always have an isolator on your winches, as they can draw so much power. So just being able to switch it off in an emergency, you got to be able to do it. It was a warm summer's day when I was wiring these up, so I had the gazebo out. Here's the driving light and light bar fuses on a custom mount, and also the winch isolator mounted up. All this is amped correctly, so everything is 100% safe now, which is exactly what you want. Ah, bugger! I had to fix a rear wheel bearing that I noticed when me and me mate VN went for a little R&D trip up into the Woods Point area. Coming down the Reefton Spur, I noticed this weird squealing noise when I did a left-hand turn. Turns out my right-hand rear wheel bearing had collapsed, and later to find out on my old man's hoist, so lucky Repco had one in stock and we fitted it on a Sunday. Just want to say thanks to me dad for helping. Here is my dad using his oxy with a cutting torch to cut a fine slit into the bearing so we could actually split it off the axle shaft. We are doing this because there was no way to actually grip onto this bearing, but also you can't get behind to press it off. So out came the oxy and his many years of experience. We then packed the new bearing full of wheel bearing grease and then pressed it onto the axle shaft. And that's another job done. Ah, bugger. We're on a trip up to Wodonga just for the weekend, and we ran into these very thoughtful policemen at a roadworthy blitz on the Hume Highway just out of Glenrowan. They put a lovely yellow sticker on my car. Love the bloke for it. Thanks, mate. This meant that I had to fix a few things on my car that they weren't happy with. Okay, thanks, mate. I had to fix some wheel poke that I had on the rear. This meant modifying my rear guards so my rear tyres would sit inside the guards. I also had to change my offset on wheels to accomplish this as well. But I also made sure my mud flaps were long enough because I don't want them on my back anymore. Then had to get a full roadworthy on the car, so fixed up a couple of extra things that I noticed with the car that weren't roadworthy. So when I rocked up the roadworthy place, my car went through with flying colours, went to Vic Roads and peeled that yellow sticker off. Back into prepping for Cape York. I added some SMIC intercooler pipes to the vehicle just before I entered into MotorX Car Show at the Car Builders Four Drive World. This was an awesome weekend where I was able to talk to some awesome people, got some extra tips about Cape York, just because some people at that event had been on it. So this was really handy as we were nearly about to leave for ours. I fitted some Travel Buddy mods to make it even better than it already was. This included a shallow cooking tray dish and also an insulated door with a latch so my pies or whatever I had in it didn't slide out on rough tracks. I got all these mods from Roadrunner Off-Road in Pakenham. While I was doing these travel body mods, I also fitted some new fishing rod holders on my new walls that I had done in the canopy, as changing my setup meant these mounts that I used to have didn't work. I picked up some broom handle mounts from Bunnings. This is a handy tip if you want to mount some fishing rods in your canopy yourself, as it's a really cheap mod. I installed a new Ironman shower tent to the side of the rooftop tent on the other side. I went with an Ironman one due to the fact that they have one that swings away from the car to the front of the vehicle on the right hand side in an opposite direction to most. I went this way because this allows me to still access my canopy for power to run a shower pump. But also, if someone's having a shower, I can still get stuff out of the canopy and not have to pack it up. I also went the Ironman shower just for the fact that it is completely blacked out and you can't physically see through the canvas when you are having a shower at night when you have nightlight around. This just gives you that extra bit of privacy when you are having a shower. For water storage, so I could have a shower along this trip, I made up a water tank under the tray using PVC pipe that zigzagged back and forward up the tray underneath, which added some extra capacity to the tank. All up, this tank can hold up to 40 litres of water, which was plenty for this trip for 2 people using it. Here's the tank laying on the ground to give you a rough idea how it sits under the tray. It then has clamps that bolted under the tray. The tap is on a screw off cap so I can always take it off to wash inside if I have to. Added some rubber on any rub points. And then while I had it on the hoist at work, I gave the car a complete hot wash and then sprayed chassis sealed on it to protect it for this trip. One of the small little jobs that I did for the Triton was I made some custom grab handles for the pillar. This allowed my short ass to be able to get in the car a lot easier when you're on those funny angles. One of the last mods that I did to the Triton before we left was I made an extra drawer for the drawer system I had made years before. This little drawer meant that we could store some of the smaller, more grab stuff in a hurry. This was a really great idea, but it was a last minute job. I was out on the last night before we had to leave. This was my last chance to get my car ready, and it was trying to fix my problem in my front diff. it was not disengaging four-wheel drive and going into two-wheel drive as it should, due to the fact that it is a vacuum operated system. I had thought in the last few days that it was a actuator problem on the front diff, thinking it was seized, so I had replaced this, but it wasn't the issue. I express posted 2 days before some solenoids that are mounted just behind the right hand front tyre. These parts rocked up on the last day I had to fix this car. I was so stressed and hoping they would fix it, and sure enough, it worked. We were on. I could engage four-wheel drive and disengage into two-wheel drive as it should. So join us in the next video where we are hitting the road and heading up to Cape York. If you've liked this episode, please leave me a like, subscribe to the channel, as this series is not done yet and there is some awesome stuff to come. Thanks for watching this part, and join us in the next part as we hit the road.